Farmers are the backbone of really society. They are the backbone of our economy, and having a profitable farming venture makes all the difference. As I visited with many of the regenerative farmers in that space, the work of Jim Gerrish is brought up over and over, and he is an absolute resource that I think we can learn a lot from. Jim, really happy, just grateful that you've taken the time to sit down and visit with me. The extensive experience you have with agriculture, especially on a route that, to many farmers seems like an alternative or maybe even an extreme measure. So you wrote the book, Kick the Hay Habit. Do you care to just go into a little bit of that detail on why that is such a, quote unquote, extreme for somebody to even think that they don't need to use hay?
See, I don't think it's an extreme position at all. All you have to do is, look back historically and think about in a big part of this country in the early 20th century, 19th century, there's a lot of areas that didn't use any hay. And then we can think about the buffalo and the elk and all the wild animals, and no one fed them hay and they got on fine. And so when I first came to the University of Missouri in 1981, and I was there 22 years, basically my assignment was to make beef cattle competitive with soybeans on marginal farmland. And the only way we were going to do that was to bring costs down. And when you look at most, for the last 40, 50 years, if you look at most cow-calf budgets, the biggest single line item in there is feed costs, and a huge chunk of that is winter feed costs. And so if you want to improve profitability, the starting point is cutting back on those winter feed costs. And hay is the most common harvested feed fed to beef cattle. And so, and I'll be honest, initially, my first few years at Missouri, we were looking at hay feeding systems, hay storage systems, that kind of research, just how to make, hay a little bit more affordable, and finally realized that if you want to change the bottom line of a cow-calf operation, you've got to get rid of the hay. And so from the mid-'80s on, we started working towards more and more winter grazing options. And on our own farm in Missouri, we got to the point where we made no hay, and if we had to feed hay, we bought it, and that was rarely more than a week. Just when we have a couple of ice storms or something was the only time we would feed hay. And so from those experiences, and at the Forage Systems Research Center, we were running fall calving cows through the entire winter on nothing but stockpiled pasture. So we knew it could be done both with spring calving cows and fall calving cows. And that took me down the path to eventually writing Kick the Hay Habit, because it's such an important thing for most farmers and ranchers in this country to do, because it is very often the difference between being profitable and not being profitable.
So it's just simple economics. It's like just taking care of what is our biggest expense, and then, doing the best we can to mitigate that. I mean, it just kind of, it really seems simple, Jim, not as extreme. I guess the management is where some might think it's extreme, but
yeah.
One thing that I'm really curious to understand is there is such hardship in agriculture with the conventional model. I think the conventional model is destroying rural America. I think it's destroyed our food system. It's destroying a lot of things that build up the fabric of a prosperity society. With profitability of these farmers, that should be like of the utmost importance to overcome that, shouldn't it?
You would think so. One of the things Alan Nation used to say very often, I'm not sure if it originated with him, but he's the one I heard it say most often, and that is most people would rather fail conventionally than succeed unconventionally. What I learned through the 40 plus years that I've been working in this field, it isn't whether something makes biological sense, whether or not a farmer adopts it. It isn't necessarily if it makes economic sense. It is simply how will my family and my community view me. And if you step outside of the expectations of your peers, it becomes a very uncomfortable position. And that's the biggest obstacle to change is people's unwillingness to step out of their comfort zone.
I think that's a great point. Talking with Will Harris down at White Oak Pastures, one of the things that he has done and definitely received is, some weird looks and stuff as he has tried to change from that conventional model his dad did, and he did early on, to what he's doing now. And I mean, I think his neighbors and even family called that group the damn Harrises, just to because they are stepping out of the conventional model. But I think the proof is in the pudding. What Will has done by doing this vertically integrated system, it's bettering the environment, it's building community. So here in Arkansas, I look around eastern and southern, and I'm watching it just die. So it's monoculture, farmland, up the poverty, and that it's sad. It is shriveling up and dying, and that's a big part of the mission is how do we create Arkansas as a prosperity zone. We should be, in my opinion, completely self-sufficient. We should be able to be sustainable. But the agriculture is the backbone of that. Can you go into the community building aspect that you have experienced over the your 40 plus years in this, in regards to changing some of these management ways of thinking and applications?
Well, unfortunately, the consumer, and we are all consumers, because we have such a cheap food system. And it has been touted for many years that Americans spend the lowest percentage of their per capita income on food compared to any other country in the world. And so we have a couple generations of consumers who just expect food to be cheap. We also, in the developed world, have the highest per capita healthcare expenditures. And it goes back to, as you said, conventional farming is ruining our health, our communities, all of those things. And people need to understand that good food is the foundation of health. And so we, as farmers and ranchers, every opportunity that we have, number one, we need to ensure that our practices are producing a healthy, nutritious food product. Much of industrial agriculture does not do that. So we have to make sure that that's what we're producing, and this whole movement of regenerative farming, regenerative ranching, restoring soil health is a step towards producing healthier, more nutritious food. So we have to do that, and then we, on every opportunity we can, whether that's through farmer markets, through local food networks, to just calling the newspaper to come out and do a story about what we're doing. We need to get that story of healthy living to the consumers, because the vast majority of consumers in this country, price point is still their number one determinant of where they shop and what foods they buy.
You're exactly right. And so that health topic is probably the individual most important aspect that we cover, honestly. So I own a farmer's market. I've got 4 kids, and my oldest was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer when he was 5. And so as I dove into why, what happened, what do we do, looking for these answers. That the nutrition was such a important aspect of that. But it just doesn't stop there, Jim. It kept going back farther and farther and farther, all the way to agriculture. And I think that's why we cover so much agriculture in here, but it's because it's simply cause and effect. It's sowing and reaping. We have to get back to the very, very basics.
Yeah. Did you grow up on a farm?
I did.
I'm presuming a
One
very
grandpa
conventional
did.
farm.
I've actually had this kind of this wide range. I've got one grandpa that raises broilers for Tyson, another grandpa that was a custom hay baler and raised feeder calves. I've experienced that. Grew up, I worked for a veterinarian, so I have been in all the Cargill houses, across farms across the state of Arkansas. So, and then done our own, just small scale.
Okay. I grew up in very conventional agriculture, and for the first half of my life, I largely believed everything that the industry was telling me. And most of us these days seem to have our health story of we knew something wasn't right, and then you try to figure out what it is. And some people, go to conventional doctors and they get on various, prescription meds to treat this, that, the other thing. And then there's others of us who, took the nutrition and food piece of our lifestyle and said, maybe that's what we need to change. And the conventional medical system and our government, Department of Health and Human Services, FDA, all those organizations just push the medication pathways. And yeah, it's easy to do, and to a certain extent, I believe it's completely addictive. Also, it does make you feel better at the time, but rarely do any of these treatments actually solve the core problem. So you're just hooked for life on taking various meds because to offset the lack of proper nutrition. Proper
Yeah,
nutrition
it's very
heals almost
profitable
every.
business.
Yeah, it's a very profitable business.
Yeah, and so I think it's really important where you were saying, the government and the industries that are, the big pharma, big agriculture, the other big pharma, big food, all of it's pretty much the same thing though. And the
It is.
lobbyist power that we've got in these bills is sickening. And so as I just look at it, I kind of grow more and more frustrated, and I feel like the only thing that we possibly can do is ourselves. We have to start with ourselves, be an inspiration or be the solution for our families, ourselves, our families, and let that expand out through our sphere of influence.
I agree completely. Everything starts, not everything. Most successful movements and shifts in civilization have started at the grassroots level and built up from there. Top down positive changes very rarely ever happen. Top down negative changes, we have a lot of that going on, and we if you follow the news at all, you read about it every day.
Absolutely. All right, Jim, I've got a really interesting question for you. If you were the Secretary of Ag for, let's say, Arkansas or Missouri, where you were before, what is kind of that policy? How would you try to create that framework to establish things that actually help the people, help farmers, help the consumers?
Well, it has to start because we have this complete top down agriculture bureaucracy. In Washington, D.C., the USDA, the whole farm support program, almost everything that they do is actually geared towards crops that are, we look at corn, soybeans, wheat, And those are the crops that have led to the cheap food policy, farming for maximum caloric yield rather than optimal nutritional yield. And until we do away with farm programs that support unhealthy crops, land degrading crops, most farmers are just locked into, that support system, and it's very hard to walk away from that. The few people who completely changed their operations from being government supported, commodity based, to actually producing food and marketing to consumers, that shows a profitable model for farming as direct food production rather than just generating commodities that get processed into imitation foods. So I don't know that the Secretary of Ag in Missouri or Arkansas can do a whole lot to change the nature of agriculture in that state, as long as the federal government dominates the whole system and continues to steer farmers into producing those crops that are mostly negative for our health and well-being, both our personal health, our community health, and the broader environmental health. Every time there's a farm bill, process happening in Washington, D.C., I would like to believe that someday they're going to change this, but it always comes back to, you already mentioned, the lobby power of big food, big pharma. All of those things are geared to maintaining the status quo, because those are the people, or I shouldn't even say people, those are the organizations, the corporations that profit from the status quo.
Yeah, I think it's become extremely evident that our country is run by corporatocracy, and it's just a kind of it's disheartening, but I think we got to kind of focus on the positives and what we can do. One thing that has been eye-opening is when we visited with Dr. Alan Williams. He brought up the mental health epidemic in farmers. So the suicide rate is astronomical. I had no idea to the degree at which it was that bad. If things are that bad, Jim, I mean, honestly, why are we not questioning this more, or do people feel just simply trapped?
I think a lot of people do recognize that they are trapped, and it's perhaps the frustration of not knowing how to get out of the trap that leads them to end their life. Maybe though because a lot of mental illness originates out of dysfunctional guts. It's because most farmers do not lead a healthy lifestyle. We like to think that we're outdoors and we're doing all that, but if you're sitting in the seat of a tractor in an air-conditioned or heated cab day after day after day, that's not really a healthy lifestyle. And again, because schizophrenia, depression, increasing evidence of Alzheimer's are all the product of bad gut health. That's the issue that needs to be addressed, and that cycles us right back to USDA and a farm program that supports crops that lead to people having dysfunctional guts.
You're exactly right. And when you start looking at the dysfunction on the gut based off of like glyphosate, it's absolutely terrifying. One aspect of all this that we're trying to do is make sure the awareness of health, it matters, because if we're healthy, if we're optimized, we can do more. We can do a better job at whatever it is that it's our mission in life. And so by being healthy, we can just simply do more. I'll want to point out something else on that nutrition topic. When we start looking into the mitochondrial dysfunction, so it goes a deeper level than the gut health, Dr. Chris Palmer put out a book called brain energy. And he is a psychiatrist that has gone into the connection of diet and mental health, whether it is schizophrenia, anxiety, bipolar, ADHD, all of it based off of mitochondrial dysfunction. But guess what messes up the mitochondria? Deficiencies and toxicities.
Exactly.
Which leads back to agriculture.
Food is medicine. Food is health. But also food is poison and food is unhealth. Depends on which pathway you go down.
That is beautiful. So I know we've covered a lot. I didn't want to just dive into just simply the hay and grazing because you have so much information out there that anybody can get that. I wanted a little bit of a new take, and I had listened to you on the Charlie, I think it's Arnott, out in Australia, where you went on to some of these different topics. And I think this is so important because too often what I have found is it's the same thing just being regurgitated just by a different person or just a different setting. And if we don't hit it from a different angle where maybe it clicks, like two people can tell the same story maybe a little bit different, and that second time or third time it hits. So I really appreciate your perspective, and I know you have your own family's health journey that brought you to this, but I really think that we've got to connect health more to agriculture on the farmers. I love farmers. I want to support farmers. Sometimes it sounds like I'm attacking them, and I'm not at any stretch. It's the model. So how do you feel being in these thousands of conferences, we can get that message to hit home?
I don't like censorship. I don't like quotas. I don't like things that say, for you to be on a conference, you have to have done this. But what we really need at all of these conferences is more and more speakers who have lived the regenerative journey. It's nice to feature, young people who are, 1, 2, maybe 3 years into regenerative agriculture. But they still lack experience, I think lack depth of understanding. And, that's about the only good thing I have to say about getting older is I think it does increase your depth of understanding things just because when you've been exposed to so many different things, different situations over the years, your situational awareness begins to increase. Your skepticism of what the industry is telling you, those things increase. Now, there is, I don't want to come across completely negative on the whole farming community, and sometimes I do get accused of that. There's that bumper sticker that says, "Don't criticize a farmer with your mouth full." But if your belly is full of crap, we do need to be critical about what's going on. But if you're going to be critical, you better have some solutions to offer as well. And I'm kind of talking in a circle here, coming back to what we need to be doing in conferences is making sure that we're offering solutions, that we aren't just pointing out what's wrong with the system and saying, we need to change. When you're ready to go to a conference and point out this is a problem and we need to change, we better have people who can deliver a solution on that program, not people who just point out that we have a problem and say we need to change. It's got to be about solutions.
I love that. And you just articulated why I will not be on boards or I have not been going to conferences, because it's simply a gripe fest and it's pointing out all the problems. I'd rather spend my time interviewing incredible people like you that we can come out with the solutions and spread those lessons. So I thank you for saying that. But we
You're
also
welcome.
have been had we've had Sally Fallon Morrell on. She's the president of the Weston A. Price Foundation. It's we get doctors all the time. It's those solutions and coming at it from these different angles. So when you were saying you kind of we're talking in a circle, I understand completely because I can't dissect it to where it's segmented. It is a circle. All of it is so interconnected. And agriculture, health, lifestyle, it is hyper connected.
It absolutely is. One of the presentations that I give, fairly regularly is, webinars and seminars is building or creating excellent pasture from the soil up. And the whole theme there is in biological systems, you change one thing. And rather than being like physics, where it's kind of a linear, you do this and this will be the response, and it's always predictable that this is what's going to happen. In biology, every management choice we make, every time we switch something within a biological system, there's a multi-dimensional effect, and it's multi-directional. We change things in every direction. Now, through most of the 20th century, industrial agriculture was shifting things in negative directions. And yeah, it's still multidimensional. It just means bad things were happening in more levels of the ecosystem. I do genuinely hope that the 21st century goes down truly as the century of agriculture regeneration. We're getting a good start on it so far. And as we make these small changes in our biological management, we're seeing ripple effects, multiple directions, some things we never even expected. So, I go back to some of the research we were doing in the late 80s and the 90s, and I had no idea that we would see such positive changes. I was looking to just cheapen up winter feeding. But then our program in what became management intensive grazing, basically a time controlled grazing, that started as rationing out stockpiled feed in the winter time. But we figured out that, to be able to have that stockpiled feed in the wintertime, you have to change your management during the growing season. And so as we did that, we saw a great broadening of plant species diversity in the pastures, started seeing more butterflies and birds and things. And, in 1987, I had no idea that time-controlled grazing, which I was looking at just as a feed efficiency tool to use in the winter, that it would have such a broad and sweeping effect. And we did very little looking at the soil, in the 80s and 90s. But what we understand now is as we increased that plant diversity within the pastures, we were also altering, diversity below ground. So I don't think I heard the term soil health until sometime in the early 2000s. When I was school in the 70s, they talked about soil quality, but not soil health. And so we were, before we even knew the term to use of soil health, we were having a positive impact on soil health because we changed something at the top end of our operation. Had no idea how far that ripple effect would go. And so the point in that presentation that I give, the point that I'm making, and I do it repeatedly through there, is that everything is hooked together. You can't change one thing and only expect this particular result. You change one thing, and there's an extensive ripple effect that goes out all around you. And we just have to learn to be better observers to understand the positives and negatives of those changes.
Better observers. I think that's why things when we ask questions it's so important, because when we don't ask those appropriate questions we don't know what to observe either. It's 'cause way too often we're focusing on the wrong thing. But I have been just fascinated with the connection between the soil and the microbiome of the like a gut microbiome on and the interconnectedness of that. It's fascinating. To go back to the solutions, Jim, would you agree that getting away from this "we must feed the world"
Oh,
mentality and go to having having profitable regenerative agriculture that's locally produced and consumed is the solution?
absolutely. Um, globalization, globalization of agriculture has led to the starvation of far many people than it has helped feed. Um, a lot of people in rural communities and the farming and ranching community have a very low regard for the United Nations. United Nations, there's Food and Agricultural Organization, there's the World Health Organization. They have all these different things. The food and FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization, it's probably 10 years ago now, maybe 12, put out a publication that really outlined the only way to feed the world is at a local grassroots organic or semi-organic level. Industrial agriculture absolutely is not going to do it. Part of it is because of how little money a industrial ag leaves in the local community. Whereas if we have a local food network, people are just passing money around within the community, and that's what keeps communities strong. And I bring up that UN and FAO because it's sometimes I compare it to Scripture. You can go to the Bible and cherry pick out, a verse here, a verse there, and justify almost any position you want to take on any issue in the world. UN publications are the same way. If it comes from WHO, World Health Organization, I'm very skeptical of it, and we don't want them to have any more power than they already have. But if Food and Agricultural Organization is going to put out a publication that says worldwide, we need to have local regenerative food systems, hey, yeah, then I'm all aboard with the UN and FAO. But yeah, I firmly believe that the key to getting our population healthier, getting farmers and ranchers mentally healthier, getting our communities healthy again, getting the environment healthy again, it absolutely comes down to a much more local food system produced by people on the land rather than just, butts in a tractor seat.
I, I'm so happy that you agree with that. One more thing that I'd like to get your opinion on before we hop off here is to go with what you were saying on kind of that, the organizations and stuff. I have found out that in Arkansas, Bill Gates owns over 48,000 acres of agricultural land on navigable waterways in Arkansas. Do you have any opinion on that?
Well, for being as smart a man as he is, it amazes me what an idiot Bill Gates is about anything actually related to ecosystem functions and, healthy food and healthy lifestyles. I think it's just as offensive that Bill Gates owns all of that land as it would be if it were the Chinese who owned that land. Land ownership on that scale by absentee owners is not good for the local community at all.
Agree wholeheartedly. I was just really curious as to your take because I I was prepping for another interview, and I came across that, and I thought, man, that just don't pass the smell test. I don't like this at all. So, anyways, Jim, thank you. Where can we send people to best connect with you? The resources that you have out there.
So our family business is American Grazing Land Services. You can find us on the web at americangrazinglands.com. Just Google American Grazing Lands, and you'll find Facebook link, LinkedIn, different things. Another part of the family business is we sell electric fencing, stock water supplies, forage seed, livestock weighing equipment, and then a lot of books. I've written 4 books that are available on our website. We have from several other authors, that I know and respect. We have a bookstore. Just click the bookstore tab. For people who want to watch a lot of YouTube videos, you can go to the Grazing Media Resources page, and we're linked to several podcasts through there. I think there's 45 of my videos up there. And Logan will want to get a link now that, I'm part of, Sowing Prosperity group. We'll want to get a link to your podcasts also put up at the website.
That'll happen.
Very good.
Well, Jim, thank you. Thank you for your time, my friend. I have greatly enjoyed it, and I think you have provided tremendous value. So thanks again, my friend.
You're welcome, and thanks for the opportunity, because the more people we can reach with this kind of information and suggestions for moving ahead, the better. Thank you very much, Logan. You have a good day.
Thank you for joining us on Sowing Prosperity. Be sure to follow along across the social media platforms, including YouTube, and be sure to go to sowingprosperity.com.
Thank you for listening to the Sowing Prosperity Podcast. We hope that you have learned something new and that you are inspired to adopt regenerative practices in your community. Remember that by working together, we can create a sustainable and abundant future for ourselves and for future generations.